do another talk here. I was thinking about it tonight, and before coming here, it's, you know, I'm in the East Coast, so it's the second day for me. But I took a shower. Well, a shower really refreshes you. It's amazing, you know. I don't usually take a shower after the end of the day. I take it at the beginning of the day. So, and I was thinking about it might have been the first time, probably not the first time I talked here, but one of the first times I talked here. And Lisa and I decided at the last minute to do a live coaching demo. And we did a double team coaching demo, which was way safer than, you know, trying to do it by yourself live, especially at that point. And I was sort of inspired by that, and Christopher Lee nominates Olaf as the next speaker. I just this just in, and I thought, I think I'm going to do some live sense making here tonight with anybody that wants to ask a question, and we'll maybe explore that. But that's a ways out. But I was just having that nostalgic moment. I've spoken here quite a lot actually over the years, and but not for a while. And nice to be back with you all. Thank you for hosting me again. I wanted to do both. You know, I have a pretty clear message. I don't vary it a whole lot. It certainly evolves some over time. It gets refined, but it's not completely different at all. It's been the same for several years. And but I wanted to have a fresh take on it. So I sort of, you know, I have been teaching Integral for about at least 8 years, 9 years. And, you know, many of you have been to those talks or trainings or something. So I'm not going to do Integral in a sort of I'm going to do it in a very summary kind of way, just to highlight some certain things and really talk about the coach's sense making. The title of this talk originally was A Growth Path for Organizational Coaches. And then I realized that the real title was actually, It Is All About You. And that will perhaps make sense as we go through this. I've got to get my little window adjusted so I can see you all. If you don't know me, I co-founded the Agile Coaching Institute with Lisa. That's a lot of where I trained several thousand coaches. I created the ACI coach competency model, often attributed to me and Lisa, but actually I created it. And Lisa helped me perfect the implementation of it. It became, actually, that's an interesting story too. I hope you don't mind if I'm a little nostalgic and sort of rambling off, slightly off topic, or let's say digressions. The Agile Coach Competency Framework, people know that, the X-Wing diagram. It came from teaching a class in Berlin for Coaching Agile Teams class, about the 4th class maybe we taught, something like that, very early on. And we had a lot of Dutch people who were unbelievably candid, sometimes annoyingly candid, and some Germans who can be annoyingly intellectual. And somebody said we didn't have a red thread. I didn't know what the fuck a red thread was at that point. What's the German of that, Volker?
Der rote Faden.
The roter Faden. Yeah. It's a great term, and it's a great concept. But it was totally true. And so I responded to that after I was done being pissed off, and created the competency framework, because I was like, oh, that's what organizes the whole thing. That's how you bring it all together. This tension between consulting and or training and mentoring, which is what everybody does, and they love to do that. The expert trap, I call it. and professional coaching and facilitation. And that tension is what created the red thread of the class, going back and forth, saying all of these are valid. It was actually a fairly integral point of view. All of these are valid, but you probably don't do the coaching and facilitation very well, and they didn't. I know that the influence of that and how people responded to it changed the profession of Agile coaching. I mean, there's so many flipping professional coaches there. It's sort of a joke because Spayd, one of the original progenitors of this, is just an ACC. I'm not a fucking PCC or an MCC. If you don't know what those are, don't worry about it. But it's kind of funny. I wish I had a marketing arrangement with ORC and with CTI too, and that's a real mistake of my life. I created the Integral Agile Transformation Framework initially, and I founded the Collective Edge, which is where Marie wave, please. Thank you. Who's our COO, and the secret weapon of environmental work. So this is about sense making for organizational coaches. And one of the things that I really focus on at this point is this diagram and the fact that we believe that we think that if we automatically, we think that we sense something and then we respond. But what's really going on behind the scenes is this making sense process, this sense making process that we don't examine. It happens in really totally fractions of a second. The way that we create judgments about things, that we classify everything into good and bad, I want it, I don't want it, I don't care. That process happens way faster than you probably ever paid attention to your own mind. And scientists haven't known that. Meditation practitioners have known that for several thousand years. And that's one of the disciplines that, I'm kind of promoting, championing, is something called phenomenology. But this making sense process, if we can slow it down and make it deliberate, it changes everything. And it's part of why it is about you. Because one of the greatest, in medicine, there's the Hippocratic Oath that you probably know. First, do no harm. And there's a lot of Agile coaches out there that do harm, from my point of view. I mean, they don't know what they're really talking about. They don't know that they're in over their heads completely, and that's a problem. It's something that I certainly am interested in trying to help upgrade. And so let's see what else I want to say about that. Yeah, I don't know. So integral, just to look at it briefly, and I've come to, that's a shift in terms of how I'm thinking about integral these days, is that integral is a meta sense-making framework. It shows us the structure of our minds and how it works, so that we can see it more clearly, so that we can see the patterns in it and what we're doing, how we're making sense that's unconscious to us, that we don't recognize or we don't know about. The horizontal perspective of the integral framework is, of course, the quadrants. And these are the 4 ways that we can experience the world and the 4 ways that we make sense. And the thing about them is that each one of them has its own epistemology, its own way of knowing the world. And they're different. They're quite different. And its own set of objects, quote unquote, that it sees, that it pays attention to, that it values. And it's like any preference, like extrovert, introvert, or whatever. We all have a favorite go-to place, which is fine, but it limits us because in all of these perspectives. And if we don't systematically take all these perspectives, we're going to be missing some important things. And it's helpful to know what our go-to is, so that we, for me, my go-to is lower left. That's where I orient from is, how is it going in the group? What's happening on this team? Are we in? That's what I orient to. An I quadrant person orients to, how do I feel about this personally? What's the meaning for me? An it person orients to, let's just take some action. Let's just do something. A lower right person orients to, I need to see the big picture first. Those are all valid ways of knowing the world, and they're limiting to the extent that we don't understand our own sense making. So if we can raise our sense making, we're going to do no harm, and then we're going to potentially be helpful to other people. These are the vertical perspectives of the integral sense making framework. Let me say something about this. So I teach this like a lot, and I often hear people talk about red organizations, and I don't know if they're misreading the colors, or if they're misreading the red, or if there really is more red out there than I think there is. Red is, as I like to say, in a red organization, when you get stabbed in the back, it's not with a diss in a meeting, it's with a knife. Red organizations are illegal. Red behavior in corporations is against HR policy, virtually always. It may or may not be enforced, right? But it is utterly unaccepted in a normal society. So I just I don't know if anybody has any perspective on that. If you see red in your organizations, other than bullies and sexual harassers and so this is a mapping of how our sense-making complexity evolves, right? And both ours and people that we work with, and the organizations, the systems that we work in. And if we don't understand that, there's going to be something missed. This level 4 Amber is a perfectly reasonable organization structure. Certainly, it was a couple thousand years ago when it first evolved. It creates order. It's a lot better than red. It's a lot more true than red is. It allows you to scale, all kinds of things in really useful ways. And it's a little out of date at this point, or to have it run things is a little out of date. It's important in every organization. You don't keep your books in a pluralistic green way. You don't run your a nuclear power plant by consensus. That's just stupid. That's inappropriate. Level 5, which is where most of the developed and business world is, orange, is more true than amber. It's more innovative. It's more recognizing of people's freedom. It's really great. Green is pluralistic. Green is also even truer than orange. It recognizes that there's wisdom in the diversity in our systems, that it's not a matter of being ethnocentric, that's a limiting belief. It's useful in some ways. It's useful for the survival of groups. And green recognizes that, it's not, orange treats business as impersonal, as transactional. And that's not a very satisfying way to live. So green is even more true. But the problem is that in integral, we talk about when you move from one whole onto another, you transcend it, but you also include its good parts. And what we do is we quote transcend and repress, or transcend and create an enemy of. So it shows up in politics. These three culture codes have huge conflict with each other that plays out in our political sphere. That's what all the polarization is about, frankly. And it's only when we get here, level 7, teal, second tier, that you really can honestly say, I'm not doing any harm. Because, a second tier is a friend to the other value memes. It doesn't vilify them. It doesn't make them wrong. And you move up that way. We'll talk about, some specific ways. You probably have your own ways, but moving up this, especially for you as an organizational coach, I don't say this about companies. The goal is not to get them to teal. That's the orange in you speaking when you want to get them to teal. It's just an ambition. It's not actually being helpful most of the time. But you getting to teal is different. You getting to teal makes you more useful in the world. This is how it plays out in an organization from amber. In each of the quadrants has a different kind of a name. Command and control leadership, that's the big bugaboo of Agilists. Conformist driven amber, a bureaucracy organization structure, a goal-centric process for product development, which is fundamentally waterfall, iron triangle. And then we get up to orange, and this mindset progresses a little bit from command and control to predict and plan, which is a bit of an advance. You have a matrix organization. Green, you have people-driven culture and customer-centric. This is, where Agile lives, is in this band. And these things go together, right? They, and then this is something to know and understand, but it's not, that level is just not very likely to be attainable within just about any client you work with. I don't really want to say that as it's impossible. But on the other hand, if you come from that place, you're much more flexible in being actually helpful to people wherever they're at. The common organizational pattern I see is this, a thoroughly orange organization. And this is as much as anything through coaches that I work with. I mean, this is what they tell me is going on in organizations, is that this is, there's often some amount of amber, but it's usually doesn't rule. And then there's a tension between goal-centric and customer-centric. And everybody pays attention to this tension into this goal, and they sort of ignore the rest of it. But that's not taken in a perspective. Could we work, with the mindset of individuals, in a coaching kind of a way, in a leadership development kind of a way? Could we work with, could we create more adaptive organizational structures? So that's the biggest thing that I see. And is that do you see that? Let's open it up for a couple of quick comments. You don't have to say a whole lot, but do you see something like this?
I saw Jorge nodding his head. I'm curious what you were thinking. Or not.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it makes sense to me. Yeah, I have seen that in customers and in my current organization.
Attention.
Yeah, even in the aspirations or in the purpose, they mention a lot the customer, but in the actions, there are a lot of goal-centric behaviors.
Yeah, a lot of metrics and measurements around trying to quantify customer value, which is not always very easy to do. Okay, so that's the for me, that's the state of play. I mean, I hardly ever have people talk about that there's even pluralistic green very much in their organizations other than Agile coaches and Agile people. So the state of play in organizations is in that orange band for the most part. Clearly not exclusively, clearly not everybody in the organization, but the center of gravity of the different departments, is usually there. Okay, pass. So here's where it's all about you. So this is a quote from my book. To fully realize the promise that agility offers, organizations must come to a deeper understanding that it is the leadership's level of consciousness that imposes a ceiling on the scope and effectiveness of the change that's possible. So rather than first focusing on Agile frameworks, systems, scaling models, DevOps, or other external factors, we address the shift in consciousness in the transformational leader as the first order of business. This shift entails upgrading the leader's operating system, consisting of both how the leader makes meaning of the world and the tools the leader needs to accomplish transformation. Like Gandhi's quote, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." So when I wrote that, I had a little more faith in helping transformational leaders within companies make that shift. And now I have less faith in that. I have a great deal of faith in you all, actually. I really do. But not so much in organizational leaders. There's something that's so, it's actually emblazoned in law in most states that companies have to exist to profit shareholders, not stakeholders, not the planet, not people, not customers, just shareholders. And, other than B Corps, or nonprofit, that's sort of a fundamental, it's sort of like gerrymandering is in politics. It misrepresents what's really going on in it, and it's a toxic force at this point, actually, I would say. Okay, so we remember this. I know it's been, there's a coaching growth model that's currently being played around with by people. This is not my area anymore. It's team level coaching. So I'm interested in, so I'm going to show you my enterprise coach framework of competencies, which is considerably more complex and adaptive, I would say. So I kept these four, but I flipped sides. I didn't have a reason to put. I was very strategic about exactly where I put things in the model. I love models. I love concatenating models together. I love sensing when they're really accurate in some way, when they speak to something that's really true. But I didn't have a reason to put it on the left, but now with the integral quadrants, I have a reason to put it on the left. So, and I added transformation down here and design over here as new skills, but those are sort of, I don't know, I'm not sure how important those are at this point. So what I've mainly done is to organize this around the quadrants, and the distinction, like the integral quadrants have, of agent or individual things up here versus systems versus collectives down here. This is a fundamental tension in organizations, and in sense making, it's a fundamental tension of whether we, when we pay attention to agents, we see the world in one way. When we pay attention to systems, we see the world in a fairly different way. So back to these types of epistemologies, ways of knowing things. So the I methodology is technically called phenomenology, which is essentially paying attention closely, moment to moment, to your actual experience, not to what you make up, but potentially to the way that you make things up, potentially to seeing your mind. Oh, I just made an assumption about you that way. It's uncovering that. You know, it's the foundation, inner awareness of emotional intelligence, right? And it's a different kind of knowing of the world than is empirical thinking. Now, it's not like one is better than the other. They're just different. They uncover different things. They show you different things about the world. They expose our own sense making in a different way. They give different insights. And cultivating the ability to have both of those is really important. And it's hard because they're not really the same at all. Over here, and I call this systemic awareness. And that's a different kind of awareness, similar to what we use when we do constellations. Somebody mentioned before, I think it was Christina. You know, it's also similar to what Orsk talks about, organizational relationship system coaching. It's a sensitivity to what's going on in the field around a system. And that's, again, a different kind of knowing. It seems similar, but it's different than inner awareness even. And then complexity thinking. You know, I'm going to talk about. Actually, maybe I'll. So in terms of how what I work with when I work to develop enterprise organizational coaches is a model for this kind of awareness, the leadership circle, a model for this kind of awareness, both spiral dynamics and systemic constellation kind of understanding of systems, because you need a discipline that, or a model or a framework or a methodology that really, here modern Agile for me, and here human systems dynamics, Glenda Oyoung. Really powerful. You know, we've been doing a lot of work with Glenda lately, doing a training called the Dragons of Complexity, and understanding in real detail her containers, differences, exchanges, model of complex adaptive systems. Really powerful and integrally aligned tool. You know, had been doing a lot of work with systemic awareness and with constellations. Finally learned how to teach people how to do constellations in a simple enough way that it works, which is like, I don't know what Volker thinks, but it's been one of the hardest fucking things. I have 3 times more training in constellations than I do in coaching. But people don't know that I'm a constellator. Mostly they know that I'm a coach. Okay, so then we have sense making, integral sense making, because remember, integral is a meta framework that shows us how we make sense, that we make sense in one of these quadrant perspectives, that we make sense along this set of altitudes, and we sort of graduate from one to another, or we resonate with one at a particular moment in time. So we have to be able to see that in ourselves, how it works in us. That's a certain level of self-awareness. We have to be able to do it relationally, and that's what the Transformation Mastery, the 8-month cohort program that we teach for enterprise coaches, it does a lot of relational sense making, shared sense making, like shared sense making conversations. And then systemic, how does the whole organization, or how does the system, not just a couple people, but how does the system collectively make sense? And that's usually hidden in mental models that we share, systemic patterns that are there that we're not aware of, that we sense maybe, but we don't really know how to articulate them or what to do with them. And there's practices around all of these, and there's different perspectives to help us make more sense of that. Then we have adaptive action, something from HSD, what, so what, now what, to do experiments to shift containers or differences or exchanges. I mean, in this system, how we work with change in an iterative learning kind of a way. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Any questions, thoughts, discussion on this?
Michael, you mentioned a system for each of them, except the inner awareness. Do you mind sharing what was the
Leadership circle.
circle? Oh, yep, perfect.
And and also just to mention, you know, I talk about having a model or framework in each quadrant, but that's a little bit misleading because I think that it leverages like HSD talks the language of complexity, but it's integrally informed in it deals with all the quadrants. The leadership circle also deals with all the quadrants, but its lever point is in the I space and in changing, you know, how our sense making works or how we view our leadership. What else? Let's see, 9:12. All right, we'll go on then. So here's 4 things that I think are problems for Agile coaches. The first one, the expert trap, making a third person truth claim in an I, thou world. So what do I mean by that? A lot of people, and I'm very sensitive to this in our classes, talk about you or one or them or when they're expressing an opinion, and you know, when people sort of annoyingly ask you to make an I statement, you know, and that can be really annoying, you know, like, what do you think, as a powerful, so-called powerful question when you're trying to coach somebody. But you know, it really is, people often try to do that. They try to act like they're speaking from the right-hand quadrants, from an it point of view, from an empirical truth point of view, when they're not, when they're expressing an opinion, or they're expressing, even more confusingly, when they're expressing their own experience. And there's a different truth quality or truth condition between the it quadrant and the I quadrant, between the left hand and the right hand. You know, on the right hand, it's true when we can verify it as an experiment, when everybody or most people would agree with it by observing. That's what truth means. On the left-hand side, in the I quadrant, truth means authenticity. It means true to yourself, right? Those are different things, but a lot of times this is part of adult development. Suzanne Cook-Greuter, Bill Torbert, people like that, Bill Joyner. Expert is a developmental stage that's between amber and orange or so. It's not totally precise, but it's where we think that our expertise is what is leadership. Expertise is what makes us valuable. You know, I have a deep streak of that, being a protector in leadership circle terms. But when we really believe that deeply, and when we act from that, then we invalidate other people's perspective fundamentally. You know, we argue about which process framework is the right one. You know, it's just inanely stupid thing. Just, you know, sorry to be so bluntly cynical, but the lack of development in some people is disturbing for me. What can I say? I'm doing what I can. So, making third-person truth claims in an I, thou world. You know, the point of asking questions or seeing when we disagree with somebody is, could we actually understand the world from their point of view? We don't have to agree with them, but, you know, it's sort of a sign of our immaturity if we can't really allow somebody else to make an argument that we could listen to. You know, that's our own insecurity. right? It's we don't feel strong enough, we don't feel firm enough in ourselves that we can allow that. And in the service of connection of I and we, you know, could we really understand somebody else's point of view without having to agree with it, but just being able to take it in?
Michael, did you say I am we?
No? Oh, I probably said I and we.
Okay, thank you.
I am we, though. That could be a breakthrough. Okay, next one. Over privileging the process practice perspective in a 4-quadrant world. Again, this is what I see coaches do, that they talk about, that I see what their organizations do, what their leadership does. It's similar to worrying about process frameworks, but now it's not just a matter of the expertise and which one is right. It's a matter of that's what they pay the most attention to, that they only pay attention to the it quadrant. And that's not what an organization consists of, right? We're obsessed with that, and it's not particularly fruitful. It's not that it's not important. Of course, it could make quite a bit of difference what the process that you use. But, you know, what's the altitude that we're coming from, you know, when we have those discussions? Could we raise it? Could we be more flexible where we could hear, you know, like at this point, I think most people love to hate safe. Probably there's probably some safe Agilists on the phone. I don't mean to insult anybody, but that there's a common, obviously, whatever that way. Could we listen to, you know, a safe advocate in open-mindedly and really hear them and really hear their experience, and not try to have a third person truth argument about it, but have a first or second person understanding of what that perspective is like. You know, part of becoming integral means the ability to take more and more perspectives. When we interviewed Ken Wilber for the book, he was gracious enough to give us quite a lot of time. And he said the two most important things in transformation are, one, the ability to see your own seer, which is inner awareness. And two, the ability to take as many perspectives as you can. So that's it's all about you. If you could raise your own sense making up, you'd be more effective, you'd be happier, the people around you would be happier with you. Third one, centering on individuals in a systemic world. Like I hear people say things like, well, culture is just people. And I'm like, no, it's not actually. It's not. It's a different species. It's a systemic phenomenon. And that's different than an individual phenomenon. So we pay attention to individual voices, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. But can we actually see what's going on systemically? That's what Constellations does in such dramatic fashion. It's what it's sort of shocking that way, how strongly it works. But that's what it's getting at, is what's that systemic entity. You know, when I teach Constellations, I distinguish between inner awareness, individual phenomenology, and systemic phenomenology. And when we have systems that run inside us, from our parents to our ancestors to our nationality to our ethnicity to our religion, and they whisper to us, those systems, they whisper to us what we should do or what we shouldn't do. But they're not us, for fuck's sake. They're almost like a parasite in a certain way. But that's the system that, or the systems that live in us. And if we can understand that better and see that in the organizations we work in, we won't treat what each individual says quite so seriously, or we'll see it as a true voice of the system and how that's true. So that's the focus on the lower half. And finally, either or thinking in a world of paradox and polarity. You know, folks know polarity management, Barry Johnson. Polarity management is a really powerful way of thinking, and HSD has something called interdependent pairs, you know, which is like there's not a resolution between centralization and decentralization, between privacy and I can't think of what the polarity is with privacy, but or personal things with professional things. We have arguments about that all the time with other people, sometimes with ourselves, but mainly with other people within organizations. And when we do that from the polarity point of view, we imagine our side of the polarity as being all the pluses of it, and the other person's side of the polarity as being all the minuses of it, which is quite convenient. It's kind of like creating a straw man argument. But when we can, I tell this a lot, as I've grown, I hold, when I feel a dilemma, I hold that tension inside myself for a really long time. And I feel like I should resolve it, but some part of me knows that I don't need to. Because when there's something that works out, when we can become a container to hold a polarity inside of us or a paradox inside of us, it helps resolve or work out how that can actually, you know, but you could call it a win-win or something, but it's not that one is right and the other is wrong, or that you have to choose one. That's just not the way it, you know, the universe gives you the answer when you hold that inside you. Not a particularly original list, but just I wanted to address it. Meditation. Meditation is in Bill Joyner, Leadership Agility, you know, expert, achiever, catalyst, synergist, co-creator, synergist. The last two really higher levels, like teal, second tier, probably. In the sample of about 350 people, everybody at synergist and co-creator had a meditation practice. Everybody. At other levels, it was mixed. Now, why would that be? It's because when we do a practice like meditation, we see the nature of our own mind. We see our sense making, and and we see our thoughts as object rather than subject. And all development is about shifting what you're looking through to what you're looking at. So meditation is the ultimate subject-object shift. It's the ultimate way of seeing that, you know, you are just witness consciousness, that you don't exist, and that all there is the I am. But that's beyond the scope here. Shadow work, you know, bringing in things that you've pushed away in yourself and bringing them back. That's especially an important move to second tier. Is you know, we get when we reincorporate our shadow things that we don't like about ourselves, or that are too great about ourselves, golden shadow, that gives us a lot more energy, and we don't need to repress things or push things away or people away. Cohorts, that's what we run cohorts because they work, you know, long-term, deliberate developmental environment. Deliberate sense making, which is sort of like coaching, but it's not quite so focused. It's more helping somebody else make sense of their world or what's going on, and we might do some of that in a few minutes. Progressive psychotherapy, which I mean, not dysfunctional, you're fucked up kind of psychotherapy, but you have to be really careful choosing a therapist. A lot of therapists are trying to heal themselves. I was trained as one, but that can be useful. And let's see. Let me go through this really quick. This is I told you this. That's just the representation of it. These are going to be in the slides. Have you put those in, Marie?
Will do now.
Thank you. These are the specific competencies that we train in our cohort, and this is a sense of it. Of having a 9-month. Couple people in the audience have been in that program. That's the structure of a lot of challenge, a lot of support, and those are we're running a master camp actually in the APAC time zone, which silly me, I traveled across the world to do that a year ago to do a program in Australia, and come to find out, that's kind of a friendly time zone to the West Coast. Right? It means it starts at 5 p.m., which is really not that bad of a time if you want to not do it at work. All right. So let's do. We got about 25 minutes. Questions, comments? You want to do some sense making about what you think?
I have a question, or kind of like a comment. In terms of being, when you show the quadrant, right, and to become an effective enterprise coach, what I'm seeing from it is that you have to be, I consider it kind of somewhat removed in order to be a change agent. So I've kind of been on the quest of kind of figuring out what belonging looks like in a community or in an organization. But then at the same time, I found that I get sucked into systems, and I can kind of feel when systems aren't working for me, and I can make that impact some of my decisions because I feel all of that like bad energy around.
Yeah, right.
And from my kind of personal sense making at this point now, I've come to the fact that I can only be, well, for me, I can really truly be effective in an organization is if I'm not necessarily completely striving for belonging, but I'm also keeping a separateness. But that's kind of what I'm thinking at the moment, kind of like the focus on quadrant 1 that you were mentioning.
Yeah. And what's the experience of that like for you, Christina? Has that been a relief to you? Has it been a tension in some way? What would you say?
It's a relief for me now because I can realize the mistakes that I've made in the past. So I can look back on it and I can realize that if I was able to remove myself, I wouldn't have had that kind of emotional energy and kind of while I was in the system. If I had the presence in my kind of individual thinking at that time to go, you could remove yourself and you could have done a bit more meaningful work as opposed to just going, I didn't sign up for this resignation.
Right. What can I ask you a question about yourself?
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself an empath?
I do. And I also consider myself of having tried to protect myself for years
Sure,
of kind of like
sure.
not
Well, sure.
taking too much in.
Yeah, sure. I
So-
mean, because that's, I mean, it sounds like you experience the world that way, and that would make you very susceptible to systems and to being overwhelmed by them or run by them or hijacked by them.
Yeah, and I also kind of identify with like, you know, the kind of underdog, like wanting to be like,
Yeah, right.
Fighting the
right.
man kind of thing.
Right. A systemic pattern that speaks to you in some way, that you're entangled with in some way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that happens to all of us. Some of us are just not very conscious of it. It's a natural, you know, I mean, what I tell people is that, you know, you only get attracted to systems that you're entangled with in some way. I mean, there's some kind of perfect, and that can be unworkable, or it can be workable. And that's what I hear you discriminating is you know now when it's unworkable, and you know how to protect yourself in some way to maintain some level of neutrality where you can be effective. Am I getting that?
Yeah, and the neutrality, if I had the neutrality in the past, I would have done more experimenting, because sometimes I ignored my sense making of going, maybe I should do this now.
Right. Anything else? Thanks for sharing that. Don't make me call on people.
Michael, I use unknowingly deja vu's as an external confirmation of being in the right place in the right time. Like if when I see a deja vu, it's like, yes, I've met where I needed to be internally and externally. What I'm experiencing today is very similar. I was writing in the chat box that unknowingly I've been working on similar concepts, or almost all of the things that you have mentioned, and seeing them connected is as if there is a collective consciousness that is connecting all of these things together. And I'm meeting the people who are working on these things, and it is great to see that you know, these things are actually connected and are complementary skills. Personally, it's surface levels.
I'm sorry. What was it? What about surface level?
What I am experiencing at the moment, for example, for human system dynamics, I'm scratching the surface. While, for example, I've experienced LCP for 3 years now. So, but it is great, you know, external validation. I appreciate you and what you have presented today.
Oh, thank you. What is your or say more about your experience of Maria and I are on the same page.
So recently, I've been with a client for 2 years, and I chose after COVID to join them as an internal coach. Very interestingly connected to what Christina was sharing, because I was experiencing lack of trust as an external coach, specifically after COVID, as if we were not invited anymore, or because of the disconnection. Anyway, the last 2 years have been amazing for me. I don't know, let's say, I don't want to use that word transformation, but it has been a transformational journey for the organization that I'm with, Health Tech, and using that whole inner dimension, both collectively and on individual level, has been amazing. Using LCP, using constellations, spiral dynamics as well. You know, I can see the difference that I've been able to enable through these tools and ways of being.
You know the concept of a morphic field or a morphogenetic field?
No, I haven't heard of that.
Rupert Sheldrake. Marie, do we have a Rupert Sheldrake YouTube? Sheldrake, he's a biologist, and he's one of the most truly rigorous scientists that I know, honestly. And he has a banned TED Talk, and he's really controversial because he pushes scientists past their dogma, because scientists are extremely dogmatic, actually. I mean, the people that run the institutions of science are extremely dogmatic. They're actually very amber. They're not even orange in their thinking. And they do things like, we can't we shouldn't investigate that to find out if it's true because it can't be true. I'm like, what the fuck? Are you kidding me? That is not scientific. That's ideological. Anyway, Sheldrake, he talks about, like I said, he's a biologist, and he you can't account for most things that happen in the development of animals or humans by genetics. People thought that mapping the human genome would be this huge, incredible thing and would uncover all the mystery. Well, that's just fucking not happened at all. I mean, it's not that it hasn't been useful and important for certain medical things. It does not account for form in the least, because the genetics of a wing and the genetics of a leg are the same. They're exactly the same. So it's something else that's controlling that or shaping that. And he came up with the idea that it's a morphogenetic field, a form level field, like a gravitational field. I mean, it's no more fanciful than a gravitational field, for God's sake. And it's how I understand constellations, is that you tap into the morphogenetic field of a system, and so you can read it and understand it. Why was I telling you that, though? I can't even remember. Senior moment.
You're on the right path, Simon.
Oh yeah, thank you. I know. Thank you, Marie. So why I was telling you that is you showing up here. You could talk about or think about as a morphogenetic field issue. That like when Lisa and I started teaching, back then we started ACI in 2010, and the total norm was 2-day classes. Everybody had a 2-day class. Nobody had more than a 2-day class. When we started doing coaching Agile teams in 3 days, and you could feel how difficult that was at first, how much sort of resistance there was. And then we changed the morphogenetic field in the industry about it. I mean, it was really clear. It was so obvious that it started to become easier, and it started to become easier to teach integral. It's not just like that you get better at it. Of course, you get better at it at some level and understand it or something. But it's way beyond that. You can just I can sense that it's beyond that. He's shaping the field somehow, and that changes things. Actually, a similar thing is when I first published part of my book way back in 2014, a guy wrote us, Johan, can't remember his last name offhand, and said, I invented integral Agile too, at like the same time. So, yeah. Saman, you say? Is that can I pronounce it?
Saman, it's a Persian name. Lovely. And again, like the IDGs and the release of the inner developmental goals was another one that like I could see everything coming together. All these different.
Which one? Which developmental course?
Inner developmental goals. Not sure if you have heard of it. Yeah, Robert Keegan.
Okay. Lisa
Peter
Lane.
Senge and a few others have come together and in support of sustainable developmental goals, the UN ones have developed this framework called IDGs, Inner Developmental Goals.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you. Olaf, surely you must have something to say.
You said you wouldn't call on people.
I said, no, I did not. I said, don't make me call on people.
See, I didn't want to hear that.
I guess not.
You know me, I tend to wait until the very end and then I say something, but I think the thing I can say now is what I put in the chat earlier, which is, even though I've been exposed to this for a number of years now, I still need these reminders from time to time that this all exists and that it would probably be more embedded in my consciousness than it is on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Well, it's why we form cohorts, because, and this connects to somebody else's point earlier, you need, especially if you're striving to develop yourself to like a second level kind of a place, an integral place, you need peers that can see you, that can talk that language, that can meet you in that. You're not going to get it from your client. I mean, maybe you get it from some friend or something that you have at your client, but you're not going to get it in general. You're just not. So you've got to get it from each other. We really had that experience with the systems within the constellation program that we do, where when people first start doing constellations, we introduce it in Master Camp, and people sort of freak out about it. Some people just totally resist it, a few people, and most people go, whoa, I can't believe that, we could figure that out. When you do it like with a cohort where you do it week after week, it's like they get into a totally different zone. And it's like it unleashes a certain kind of psychic ability in people, sort of in general. I mean, because sensing into the field is like just normal. It's Western science that's made that seem impossible, or like some illegal substance or something. Think about us as human beings, developing over hundreds of thousands of years as pack animals. Do you not think that we, like horses and dogs, that we would know how to sense each other? That we would know, was this tribe approaching friend or foe? That'd probably be, if you didn't make that right assumption, you didn't contribute to the gene pool. So it sort of solves it, actually, doesn't it? So it's just a normal thing. But anyway, when you have peers around you that are all continually validating that that's a completely realistic perspective, it's like it changed. I mean, they become really bonded with each other, because it's such a relief. Yeah, thank you for bringing that out. Anything else you want
to? I could make a pitch for people to join your programs. They have been so incredibly transformative for me. Yeah, it's been amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Your transformation has been amazing. Again, it's a shifting of the field. Like Master Camp has started to fill itself. It doesn't take so much promotion, and it's like the last one was like, holy fucking cow! It was so deep, the level of connection between these people. It was just like, whoa. Watch out. It's very blissful to be with people like that.
I have a question. in terms of when you're kind of talking about, finding the cohort and you working together, I've been kind of trying to figure out if from other people and they've been coaching, like let's say within any org, and I know all of us, we are kind of, intrinsically motivated and we're all into this kind of coaching and how to make change. But I'm wondering in terms of the real impact that we can make in spaces where there are a lot of people who haven't gotten to that inner awareness, or to spaces where they are intrinsically motivated. Because when I think back to my former self, and I don't think I would have gotten to this level of motivation having not gone through all of that suffering and toxic situations.
Right. Yeah, sure.
So when we're showing up in spaces and there are people who are still at the beginning of their journey. Yeah, I've just been kind of seeing.
What's your question about that, or for yourself?
My question about that is in terms of when we enter these spaces and we want to be, let's say, the change agent.
Yeah, right.
And we're met with people who are just on their journey. They've not gotten to that space yet. And there's not much we can do other than, hey, hold up what the possibility is.
And whether that's the best use of you, is that the question that you have, or whether you
that and kind of stories of hope where there is like this this real thing. I kind of think it's, it's just going to go as it's going to go.
But for me, I needed to find where was my sweet spot and where was I used the best. And for me, it's definitely not in an orange organization. That's just a total waste of me. I mean, it's not that I couldn't understand their dilemmas or their point of view. I mean, find them, reasonable, but it's not a good use of me. It's not, my sweet spot is in helping people move from first tier to second tier, basically. That's where I'm best used. So that's fortunate for me because I get to hang out with people like you all, rather than silly clients. But God bless those that, there's some people that can really work in amber organizations in government and can be, happy, and bless them, if that's what works for them. That's great. And it doesn't need to be you if it's not, but it might be. It's probably not for you. Just a guess, but
so you know how in some surveys year after year the Danes come out as some of the happiest people on earth. You know why that is?
What's that?
Yeah, they have extremely low expectations of life.
Oh, that's
Well, that is something you would say.
Oh, that's interesting. If you don't know, Olaf is a Dane, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, low expectations are.
That reminds me of, this is a sort of totally tangential, but I often talk about Trump as a real example of a red leader. I mean, he's completely centered in red, which is not a political statement. I mean, it's a statement of developmental, expertise. But he's actually not a healthy red leader. A healthy red leader is a Viking warrior, who leads the charge and goes and slashes the enemy's throats, as a hero, Genghis Khan or something that has admirable warrior qualities. That's what healthy red is like. A Klingon warrior. Or a Danish
Hence we have Bluetooth.
Hence we have what?
Bluetooth. Named after an old Danish king.
Was it?
Yeah,
He was named Bluetooth?
his name was Harold Bluetooth.
Did not know that. How many people knew that? Anybody?
Ken did.
Olaf is a treasure trove of somebody raised their hand and suddenly put it down.
Did we lose Alina? No, there she is. I'm sorry.
Oh. So we have 3-4 minutes left. Any last thoughts, questions? Star Trek can't be underestimated. True story.
I'm new to this crowd, so I have a lot of questions, Michael, if that's okay.
Sure.
The most mysterious practice out of all of these for me, it has been sense making. Where is a good place to read more or learn more about sense making?
Yes, Volker?
Developmental psychology.
It's
And
what?
developmental psychology,
Oh,
and
sure.
and in particular, childhood development. Because whatever decision you made as a 2-year-old is likely still driving your world. We just don't know.
And in the context of sense making in a complex environment, so the skill of seeing patterns and developing a story and understanding. That's what I define as sense making, by the way. I'm not sure if that's the right definition.
Michael Hammond's book, Evolve Agility, is a good one. Honestly, our cohorts. Because it's, why I'm trying. I can't find a single source because for me it's such a synthetic thing between like HSD is really important part of it and integral theory altogether. A lot more than we've gone into. So absolutely integral theory. I'm trying to think of. It's not exactly directly tied, but integral spirituality. Ken Wilber is a more advanced version of. Yeah. Marie, can you think of anything?
So we've mentioned, of course, about the morphogenetic field and integral, and they've recently launched the Institute of Meta Theory, Applied Meta Theory.
Applied Meta Theory, yeah.
Yep, Applied Meta Theory, and there's Integral Life, developmental psychology, of course.
Totally integral life.
And spirituality. Yeah, no, that's it.
Can you relate to David Snowden's work at all in this space? He's one of a kind person.
Can what about relate to what?
And David Snowden.
What about
Canadian guy? Have you worked with his material around sense making specifically?
No, I've really chosen Glenda as a complexity path.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
It made me think of something that I was going to say. Gone. All righty. Maybe that's a wrap.
While you guys thinking about a last question or not, I'll just quickly launch the poll and Michael can take a breather.